when you're in the pit is when you're the most open, the most humble, the most vulnerable, the most broken, and the most in need of answers, right? So I think that's a great time to build players up, but also getting to understand, like, in order to be confident, you usually have to go from in your comfort zone to out of your comfort zone.
Welcome to the Jamodi Podcast, where we interview coaches and leaders to find out not just what they do, but how they do what they do. Becoming the best version of ourselves is Jamodi, just a matter of doing it.
Today we are joined by current ESPN college basketball analyst Brian Burton. Brian has 15 years of coaching experience at the junior college, D2, and D1 level, including 6 different D1 schools. He's the Rising Coaches DEI Vice President. Brian is the founder and CEO of sports media, management, and consulting companies. He's also a basketball consultant for coaches, players, and programs. Before we hear from Brian, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media at Jamodi Podcast.
There he is.
Let's see if I can get this Bluetooth going. We don't need to. We'll go no Bluetooth.
You sound good.
Excited for this whole podcast. Like, tell me about it, man.
I beat you down. I never stopped hounding you, but that's the sign of a good player is persistence.
That's the sign of an elite leader. That's what that is. Elite leadership.
Elite leader, or I just
sorry I did not get on sooner. It was probably about the craziest time in my life. But
well, you become an ESPN analyst, and now that's awesome. By the way, congratulations, man.
Thank you, man. It's exciting. It is definitely exciting. This whole world has been exciting, man. I'm enjoying the life, the second chapter.
Yeah, I get to say that I knew you, back when.
I get to say that I played with you, and that you played at Baylor, and I did not, and that you're way cooler than I am. And you wrote a book.
I don't know.
You wrote a book.
I appreciate that. I don't know if the playing thing is like. I don't think that'll get you any street cred anywhere.
I don't know though. Baylor's national champion. It's different. The old Baylor, no, get you nothing.
That's right.
They're national champs now.
There were years when I would say I played at Baylor, and people would like smirk,
why?
Why?
Why did you do that?
Why? But now,
are you proud of that?
Now when I tell players, they're like, "Oh man, like coach must have been able to play," and I really don't want to tell them that. We only had 6-7 players on our team, and so,
that was a wild time.
So playing time wasn't hard to come by that year.
That was a wild time.
But man, thank you so much for giving up your time. I do know you're busy, but I appreciate you doing this with me.
Yeah, glad to do it, man. It's a teammate right here. Got to do it.
What's your favorite culture building activity?
Ooh, this is a good one. Favorite culture building activity. The fun part about these questions is, like, if you ask people at a certain time in life what they would say then versus what they would say now, I would say, so my wife is now a high school volleyball coach. She's a former collegiate volleyball coach at 2 different universities, Midwestern State in Texas and Newman University in Kansas. Wow. And she's going to be in the Hall of Fame at her Division I. She played at Colgate. She played softball and volleyball and has like records in both. She has the RBI record.
She's big time.
She won a Little League World Series in '97. Like, she's a stellar athlete, like not even close. So she's in a category of her own. So she's coaching now at a high school, and we've had some of these conversations about team building. And to me, I would say the best culture building team connecting activity is, however you do it, there's a lot of ways you can do it, but the sooner you can get people to share vulnerability, the more connected you'll be. I think sharing fears out loud in front of their teammates is so powerful because it sheds light. The faith part of me, comes out, and it sheds light to darkness, right? Yeah. And so when you put light on it, it's not as scary. And then when people can encourage you in it, it's not as scary. So I think those things kind of make you super tied in when you can really get vulnerable about something that's either already happened to you or something you're going through or something you're afraid of now. And when the coaches participate too, that's important because it can't just be player, 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 player. And I think secondly in that is a culture of celebration, which some of that I stole from some of my past stops, but more so even from PGC.
Right.
I'll give them the credit and the snaps on that of celebrating people in front of people. And I actually did it way back in the day when I had a AAU team, just because I felt like it was missing from my playing career sometimes. So we would talk in circle and acknowledge other people in circle, because there's power in hearing it in front of your peers when you know it's going to be positive. It's very cool to receive that. So I think that those two things I would say do more for building trust and building like we're in this together really, than just some of the more surface stuff. I think the deeper you can get, the better, the faster, the more you get to really know what you're dealing with.
Yeah, I think coaches we need to be intentional about learning ourselves, learning about players' stories, but even more importantly, them learning from each other's stories and being able to develop more understanding as to why we guys react a certain way, kind of maybe knowing more of where they've come from. And you said something about like fears, things like that. It's even better when it's not about basketball, because I think we're guilty of so many things with culture that we do in basketball or teams being all about sport.
Right.
But you're right. You can get deeper when it's beyond that.
Yeah, you hit on something I left out. So the three parts I would say is addressing fears, celebrating each other, but learning other people's stories. Like you said, it's basketball and not basketball. And I find myself now, the more I connect with people, is just trying to learn their story, because it gives you so much more context for where they are now, and even appreciation or understanding or compassion. And those things you just, especially in teams, we have a guilty habit of just like assuming that this player has it all together because they're a good player and they get this kind of recognition, or that this coach has it all together because they're at this place. Now you see the finished product almost. You don't know what went into the story to make it there. And when you know that story, and it helps people connect too, like, man, I had something like that too. Or, oh, this happened to me too. So then it makes those people on the team more connected. And I think the more connected teams we all know are the ones that end up going to another place that you can't get to if you're not connected.
And just to piggyback, I think what's important too is to be intentional with doing it at least once, but to do it more and often. Right. And so we have and I got this from TJ Rosine, he's a PGC guy. He has tough Tuesdays. And so my guys know that after some type of ball handling that we do, we're going to partner up with somebody different every week. And you got 1 minute to share something tough that's going on in your life, because you just nailed it too. We assume that everybody else has it together but us. And the moment that you hear from a peer that they're struggling with something that is similar to you, there's freedom in that. And knowing that someone else might know exactly what I'm feeling and going through. I think talking about culture and togetherness, man, that helps a ton.
Yeah. And I think when you really think about what we all hope to say and good teams say, and even not good teams say sometimes, is like family. You break in this, you have this family atmosphere and you say family. But if you think about the great families dynamics, high level families, they do have that closeness and they do have that. And that's what makes you not just the time together, but the hard stuff and going through it together and knowing that you're more or less going to be supported and not judged, and you're going to be encouraged in that, is so powerful for creating that family. So I think, culturally, if you can do it consistently, even better, better.
You mentioned about celebrations, and I've been with PGC as well. And we even snap at Faith, and it's got you would love this walking down the hallway. It's gotten to the point where snapping has become almost a greeting, where we see each other from far away. We say, "Hey, good to see you. Good to see you." It's more, way farther. But and now other students and other sports are snapping at Faith. I've never asked them to, but they just do it. But we use a culture of celebration quite a bit, and I found that after a tough practice, you and I, and probably how we're wired, we want to address all the negative things that we just saw in practice. But what I've been able to find, and you probably can too, or have seen, when I ask the group, hey, What are some good things that you saw? What were some celebrations that you have from practice today? I get to hear the player's perspective, and when I'm
Wow.
hearing them talk the good thing about the good things, my whole perspective on practice changes, and I
Yep.
think that that helps the players as well.
No doubt. No doubt. I love the snaps. I also love the celebration because sometimes what you think people would celebrate is not. And when you hear the player's perspective on celebration, it's like, wow, they got that. We're even my kids are so young, it's hard to do it consistently, but we try to do it with our kids at 4 and 2, just getting them to talk about, hey, what are you proud of for yourself for what you're doing right now? Just so it becomes something where they can take more ownership, because the world we live in is so critical, and human nature is focused on negative. Oh, I gotta get better at this. I'm not doing this well enough. So to actually celebrate along the way, and it can't just be celebration all the time. Obviously, there's a balance, but
That's right.
to celebrate is so important, and it's something we don't do enough. And if you see the culture even of college basketball now, I can't speak for other sports, but college basketball, people are celebrating locker room wins more than ever before. Before, a coach would never get doused with water unless you won a championship.
That's right.
But now it's a common theme because it's so hard to win games, and you have to almost make it. And the cool part about social media is it's almost made it where, because it's a thing. And now it's a part of the culture where people celebrate wins more, where before, oftentimes a coach would come in the locker room after a win and talk about what could have been better. Instead of like, hey, we won the game, coach. We can get to the other stuff. So, no, I love the concept of celebration. We've even brought it to like our life group here that we're in as far as church. And just what I'm learning outside of basketball is bringing cultural successful things to other pockets that are not necessarily a team that's competing, because I don't coach a team anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm a part of a lot of different organizations or things, but people aren't used to celebrating. So it's like, again, I just think it's such a big thing. And then also to acknowledge people, and for them to celebrate themselves is really hard because people aren't used to doing it, and then you also find that when people celebrate across the way, you never would have thought that person would have thought that or said that. And there's so much that people receive from that.
The Jamodi podcast is powered by Sideline Interactive. Sideline Interactive is the leading manufacturer for high-quality, innovative scoring tables and LED video display boards that help coaches and schools bring more excitement to fans, create huge fundraising opportunities, and make their jobs easier. Visit sidelineinteractive.com to check out their amazing products. What's your morning routine or favorite daily activity?
Ooh, I love these questions. It's good stuff. My morning routine is a little crazy because it revolves around a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 9-month-old. So the routine is never quite what you want it to be, but it usually consists of making them breakfast. It usually consists of praying with them. It consists of some type of praise music, either on the way to school, if I take them to school, or while they're eating breakfast. So try to have as much happiness to start the day, and then try to make sure we're keeping first things first with our faith, either by prayer together. We should try to pray as a family before we leave the house, even if one of us isn't leaving or some of us are. Just try to make that culture of, connecting with our faith a first part of the day. Do my best to do some devotional time, whether it's praise music, whether it's reading scripture, as best I can. I'd say that's one of the favorite parts of the day, just because I want to keep first things first.
Yeah.
And I think it's so easy in the world of busy to not think that we need that. And I think I've finally gotten to a place in my life where I've surrendered enough to know, like, hey, I need this. Not I want it, not as cool, but I need this for me to be my best self and do your will and not my own. So I think that's probably one of the coolest parts about the day. And then I'd say something else is cool. I'm getting better at this. So this is my new thing, my new wave, is picking 2 to 3 people a day to just send a voice note to, not to call, because then it thinks you have to answer. And then voicemail, some people check, some people don't. So I'm getting better at this new, and I just started probably a week ago, of just like holding the record button down, giving them a 1 minute, whatever, and then just leaving it. So I think I'm in a place where I want to make sure I'm serving more than I'm receiving. And it's harder to do when you don't have a team. because that's an easy place to know you can serve, especially when you're an assistant coach.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly in that mode of serving your head coach, serving your staff, serving your players. So I think just making sure I'm, just putting out positive and encouragement and acknowledging people, because you just never know what people are going through. You never know if people need to be seen. And I think I'm so used to that as an assistant coach, trying to juggle so many guys, like mental psyche and their performance, that now that I'm not in that space, just making sure I'm doing that with my family, my friends, people in my circle, people across the way. Even sometimes we see people on social media and we give a like, but we never actually tell that person, right? So I think what I'm getting better at is just taking time out, like I said, 2 or 3 a day, just 1 minute, like leave a quick voice note, acknowledge it. Hey man, I saw this, really cool, congratulations, whatever, and keep it moving.
I love that. And just that little nugget right here. I know the rest of our talk is going to be good. But that's exactly like why I'm doing this, is because there's so many great leaders out there, influential people that have these amazing routines and are so successful and intentional. But
Right.
like the whole tagline behind this is, it's not just what you do, but how you do what you do. And so you wanting to impact people every day, awesome. That's great. How do you do that? I
Right.
love the 2 to 3, the 2 to 3 people and using that voice function, because that's even, I do a Tuesday text with my players,
Yeah.
current and past. Every Tuesday, they're going to get something, but it is the same text to everybody. It's not personal. And I think going one step further with that would be huge.
Yeah, I think for me, what I keep learning and I keep challenging myself, and it happens this way in marriage. You're obviously, this life. So, like, I think sometimes it's easy with the people that love us the most to just think like you get a pass, which you do, or just to think you're good. And I think I've even re-energized myself in my marriage. This is where it started, honestly. I just re-challenged myself to do 40 days in a row of videos to my wife that are at least 3 minutes about something that I love about her. Right. So this is how it started. I'm going to be honest. Because we were just having some little small, like we have great in 9 out of 10 categories, but there's like a category and a half that just was becoming magnified. And the perspective for me wasn't where it should be. And I just wanted to change the energy. And I'm like, all right, I need to challenge myself discipline wise to do something to just change our energy. Because sometimes we condition the people we're around because of how we interact with them, and not on purpose, but we either, small example, like she may say something and I may not give a reaction that's inviting. So now she feels more closed off on that topic. So then the next time, if I do it again, well, slowly but surely, you've conditioned this thing that you didn't even know you were doing.
Yeah.
Right. So I think for me, it started there and challenging myself to be a better husband, because that's the place I want to be the best at in life, more than a coach, more than a businessman, more than a leader, anything else. Like, man of God, husband first, father next, right? Because if I'm a great husband, the father part will kick in because of that commitment, right?
Yeah.
And so it started there. And then when I realized there was like this audio button that I could use, I never really used it, really, to be honest.
Yeah.
And when people send it to me, I'm like, it's kind of weird. But I just kind of got into a groove with it. And I'm like, you know what? This is a cool way for me to make a personalized acknowledgement. So even like Thanksgiving, I probably did way more than 3. I did a lot of them, but it just made it where sometimes the text it's hard to be as specific in text because there's so much grammar and things. Like you want to make it look good. You don't want to shortcut it, but it takes time, So I think for me, it just helped me condense time and something I really wanted to do and be effective at. And so, yeah, I'm excited about it. I've had a lot of fun with it, and it's been cool. And it's, like you said, it's personalized in the fact that it's a voice thing too.
Yeah,
so
I was going to say it's the sweet spot between having to type out the text, but then having to get on a call because to be honest, we don't have necessarily, sometimes we don't have time for 3 5 to 10 minute conversations on the phone, in addition to the face-to-face conversations at our workplace.
Right.
So I love that idea. Very good.
Yeah, thank you. It came from above. It wasn't from me.
What's one of the best things that you borrowed lately?
Ooh, another good one. Another good one. So I'll go parenting on this one. So I would say I've stolen to, and I think I've been good at it at times, but I think I've stolen to make sure that I don't get on the phone when I'm in the car with my kids as best I can, right? Unless it's really important, I do the best I can to, so my kids go like 20 minutes away for school every day. So whether it's to school, from school, and what I've stolen is that's a time that's like a sacred time that you get to, almost like locker room in a sense. Like you get to have a conversation with undivided because you can't go anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you get to listen to their day. You get to connect with them, sing with them out loud and be silly. And I think it's just a time for them to be seen instead of like, hey, we're transporting from one place to the next. So yeah, I stole that one, and I stole it a little while ago, but it's been such a norm for us now that and sometimes it's even like using my phone to play a cool song that will put them in a good mood when they want to cry and break down in the back seat, right? Because kids are tired, they're hungry, whatever. So I think if I would say a good one I've stolen, it's been really good because before, anytime in the car, it felt like, well, I can be on hands-free. I can get some work done. I can do this. And I think that 30 minutes, if I say that this is a priority, then my actions have to reflect that. So God has been checking me on some accountability things lately, which I embrace. And I think that's been a really good one, even with my wife, just to not be on the phone as much, not text as much, just try to connect in conversation.
I think it's a great reminder for, obviously, if coaches are out there have kids and they're traveling with them, to use that time and be aware of all of the fillers or fluff that can really be, I mean, we don't get that time back.
No.
And so you've found a way just to remind yourself to be intentional with that time. But then here's another way to look at it too, is even if you're an older coach and you have that, everybody has that drive time for the most part. I mean, very rarely are you living right next to the place where you work. So you have that time. How many people are using that to better themselves or to enrich their lives? Or do I have on 105.3, the fan, and I'm just listening to them blast the Cowboys? And I'm in this angry mode too. If I don't understand how that could happen, or do I listen to a podcast? Do I listen to chapters of the Bible? Do I listen to a sermon? Do I listen to coaches and better myself and make that more of a mobile classroom instead of what it can be for most of us, which I'm guilty of quite a bit? That's just dead time that I'm wasting.
Right. It's kind of like get from point A to point B. Another one I've done kind of like for the first time, I've done this more too. It's just like, don't have anything. If it's just me, no phone, no devices, no radio, no, just like literally be in silence, because we very rarely are we ever in silence.
Never. Besides sleeping.
Exactly.
When are you ever?
Maybe in the shower. Maybe.
Yeah.
If you don't play music. That's about the only two times. Like for me, those are. So I just got figured out, like, there's been a few times where I've been in the car and I'm like, I just need everything off. And just like, I just need to be able to process and just be still, and just allow myself to not be busy, because our day is so jam-packed and we're always trying to maximize time, or we're just unplugged where we're watching the TV or we're doing something that we enjoy, that's entertainment that helps us stay refreshed.
Yeah.
But I've found that for me has been another thing, and I don't even know if I've stolen it. I just have implemented it, just because
it's a great reminder.
So much stuff going on. It's like to be still and have quiet. It just allows you. It's almost like going on a run, if you will, and not having music and just being in that space, or working out. But most of the time we have music, so it's like it takes that other part of our brain. So yeah, I've done that here recently quite a bit. It's not a lot of times I'm in the full car by myself, but I've tried to do more of that, to just be still, let your brain just run and go where it's going to go, and like not have stuff.
Yeah, because I think of the shower time. Isn't it amazing how those are the moments when you think of something that you needed to think about. You answer a question or solve a problem that you really needed to solve.
Yep.
But I think there's other moments. I'm thinking of all the drive time, again, just listening to the radio or listening to something that isn't building me up or making me a better person in any way.
Not adding value.
Not adding value, but I could just use that time to be still. Maybe that's a time for God to speak to me in some way, or for my own brain to have the ability to work through some stuff. So two or three great nuggets there, man.
Not bad. Not bad. Not bad for the retired college coach. Not bad.
Coaches, the Jamodi podcast is powered by Biology. What's your BSA score? The Biology Skill Assessment is the only verified skills metric endorsed by the NIA and NJCAA to discover and develop the best talent for your team. This 10-minute, 100-shot test can be taken for free today on the Biology mobile app. Elevate your game. What are opportunities for learning or growth that you've recently found?
I think the part is growth is like, so I'm in a different lens space now, but I have the context. So I'm not a college basketball coach now, done it for 15 years, over 17 years, so almost 20 years of my life. And I'm not that, it's more than half of my life so far has been in that. And then you count the playing time, I mean, it's your whole life, you know? So we have this lens that we experience things in, and then we unplug. And now I'm doing so many things kind of in and around the game that are not coaching, that I think the opportunity for growth has been to not bring in my preconceived or my own experiences to what I'm coming to, right? And really try to be open to hearing and learning, like, how does this coach do it? What are they about? How are they, you know what I mean? And not, so let's take broadcasting, for example, not trying to project my thoughts about basketball onto the broadcast and only mine. Like, obviously, there's going to be some of mine in it, but I'm doing as best I can to actually connect to the programs that I'm broadcasting for, so that I have more context for their story.
Yeah, making it about them.
Yeah, not just my interpretation of their story or what I see in that moment. So I think it's just another way for me to serve and really serve their. So like the first game I did a couple weeks ago was a Division III playing a Division I, right? And they're playing on ESPN Plus, so it's a big deal for this Division III. They don't play on ESPN Plus, and it's in state, so there's people going to be watching it. And so there was a couple things that were so important to them, and we played phone tag probably for, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 times, and the guy could have been like, he could either not wanted to get with me, or I could have just been like, all right, whatever. I tried, it didn't work. But I was pretty adamant, like in recruiting, like, hey, I'm going to get this guy on the phone. I'm going to get this information. And so 2 cool parts about that was, like, he told me after the game, when I called him after the game, didn't have to do that, but I wanted to acknowledge his team, because the second half they really competed and played well, and encourage him a little bit and just talk about, you know, his team. And then he said to me that their AD and their vice president acknowledged him, how excited they were about the broadcast, because we brought up things about their school that celebrated their school and told their story, which I thought was really cool. And then he acknowledged to me, he said it meant a lot to him for me to continue to pursue him, to connect with him, to be able to give him that opportunity for him to look good on his campus and with his people, that he didn't want to just make it about his basketball team, but about the school. So it's like stuff like that, I would say, just like not coming in thinking like, oh, I'm this or whatever it may be. Just learn people's stories, meet them where they are, and give a chance to honor what they would want to be told, and be open to that, instead of just like, well, they're not doing this, and I think they should be doing this. And if they're a good team, they're doing it. Like, it's like, I mean, you don't really know that though, you know? So right. I think the part, like, you look at Baylor, for example, who we talked about before, no one would have thought when Matt Saman was playing for them that years later that they were going to win a national championship. There's no way. And I worked at Abilene Christian. Nobody thought when we made the move to Division I that they would go to the tournament, and let alone go to the tournament again and beat Texas in the first round. Like, these things that we think can't happen, we put these boxes on our mind. And I think for me as a coach, when I experienced college basketball, one of the hardest parts about college basketball as an assistant coach sometimes is that you are kind of put in these boxes, right? You're kind of, well, you're responsible for just this, and you're responsible for just this. And until somebody gives you an opportunity to do more, well, you're going to stay in this little box. And you almost think of yourself as this, well, you're just a recruiter, or you're just in charge of this, or you know what I mean? So I think I probably took a little bit of that and said, how would I want somebody to treat me in this way? And try to humble myself enough to not make it about me and just like, let me learn. Let me still be a student of a new craft, of a new school, of a new place, and not just think like, oh, because I coached all these years, I know what I'm talking about. It's like, gives you credibility, but it doesn't help you learn this craft or that school.
And I think you're right on the money, because as you were talking about that, I just start to go back to the hundreds of games that I've listened to.
Right.
And where there's sometimes where I just am, so I'm enjoying the connection between what I'm visually seeing and then what I'm hearing.
Right.
And I'm learning more about the teams, the programs,
Right.
the coaches, the universities, and what they have coming up, what they've gone through.
Right.
And then there's those times where, and it could be with very credible people, names that that I feel like this is just about him.
Right.
And you're right on the money. I think there's a fine line between, I want to know what you think and what you see because of your experience.
Right.
But it can't be the show. The show has to be the players and the coaches. I don't know. I just jumped to a connection between us as individually as coaches with my own team.
Right.
It can't just be like, honestly, dude, my players don't care that I played at Baylor. They don't care. They don't even know how bad we were. They weren't even born, at this point now. They don't care about that. They don't care about how long I've been coaching. What they care about in that moment is, do I know their stories? Am I organized? Do we have a plan in place that is going to give us the ability to be successful? And do I really believe in them? Right. And I think you just hit it. I think we can take the story that you've talked about in your lens now and use that in coaching still.
Right. And I think it's like, sum it up in like a word or two, a phrase, like, do you see me? Do you see me? And then, do I respect that you're going to help me go where I want to go? It's really as simple as that. Like, people talked about Steve Nash, and I thought like Steve Nash is going to be a really good NBA coach. I thought so. Highest IQ you can possibly have as a player, as connected of a leader as you could be. But he's going to see those guys for where they are. He's not going to make it about him, but he's going to be able to add value to their game and to how he approaches it. So when you can add value and you can see people and respect where they are, it just goes a long way in any business, in any field, I think.
So going back to a little bit of when you did spend so much time in coaching, and you also played for a while, so you've been around a lot of coaches. How did you build confidence in players?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think, and even doing it now, I still do some player development stuff. I still work at some of the camps here and there, and I'm always a teacher of the game, and I can't stay away from it. So, and I love the individual time to help a player develop. So for me, developing confidence, a lot of it is about like where you are now and where you want to go, and then like helping them understand, even though you want to be here, like you can still be great. You got to be great here to get there. It's like helping them see the roadmap, I think, is a huge part to give them confidence, because it unlocks some of the pressure that they're putting on themselves. Like, I'm not there yet. I'm not shooting this. I'm not doing this. So I think so I would call it like zooming out.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're so zoomed in to right now, and this workout is like, hey, zoom out. Let's talk about where you've come from and how you got here. And then let's talk about like where you're going. You got a similar journey that you already had, and you've already proven success. So I think sometimes that's a big thing for me, is helping them understand the context of where they are to where they want to go. That's a huge part for players, because they struggle with that because they're just thinking about the zoom in right now. So collegiately, that was a big thing for me. And then I think also just getting them to understand like where their giftedness is a part of being confident. Is like, again, so in college, you find you have these high-level high school players. Essentially, they were the best player in their city, their state. their area, that, you know what I mean? They've won all these awards. Their identity is basketball. And they really haven't, most of the time, had like tough stuff happen to shatter that identity. Well, you get to college and there's 13 dudes on scholarship, and it gets real. And it's not just about how talented you are or what you did before. That got you here, but now you have to start over. It was the entryway to get in. So even getting them to understand that is half the battle for freshmen, because they just think like, well, I'm just as good, or well, remember when you were a freshman in high school? Were you better than the senior? I mean, maybe in some ways, but you're doing that again. You know what I mean? Even though you're so proven now. So I think just, again, context, and then getting them to understand their giftedness is really important, in my opinion, because there's a difference between skill and something that you've crafted over time and hours and hours and hours of developing at a craft, and something that you're just gifted at. You know, somebody who can run and jump like a Sean Marion back in the day, or I'm trying to think of some guys from Dallas so I can give some Dallas shout outs. But I mean, obviously you look at LeBron James or Giannis, like those guys are gifted vertically, athletically, that's different than most people, right? Russell Westbrook, as a smaller guard, is gifted in that way. So I think you're understanding people, to get them to understand what they're gifted at, and then, hey, this is your skill levels over here, or your IQ is over here. Like, get them to understand the difference between it instead of just thinking like their overall talent. So I think that's another thing for me. And then because confidence can come from you just having success before, and maybe you don't really know how you had it, you know, maybe you don't really. So breaking that down. And then I think lastly, finding ways for them to, again, go back to their story and celebrate themselves, to bring that to them, to know that, hey, you can get through this. This is hard, but you've gotten through hard before. But also just, just finding ways to, so I guess two-part. One is just give them success that they can build confidence on, right? So like, let's say a guy's a shooter. You were an elite level shooter. There's times where you just hit a wall and you feel like you have a block, right? Like, I can't make shots, and you're in your head. So just finding ways to get them to be in the gym and have success. So don't do the hardest drills first. Sometimes you got to do some of the easier ones, right? Like, success breeds more success, and let them feel good. And then you stack on top of that, you know, instead of feeling like you're doing the same hard drill and they used to be great at this, but they're not, and they're measuring themselves versus their old self. So find a way to let them have success again. It's so important for players. And your job as an assistant coach in college is, these guys have to perform, you know, your job is to help them perform. And it's not even about the plays it's just about like helping them get out of their own way most of the time and unlock that. So I'd say that's one. And then the second one is, I think for players, like in a development sense, and they're in this development model, if you will, like there's usually that part where like you come in and you're confident, and then you fall off a cliff and you struggle, and like you're in the pit, they call it. And I think that's where I did some of my best work, and still do with former players and players, is when you're in the pit is when you're the most open, the most humble, the most vulnerable, the most broken, and the most in need of answers, right? So I think that's a great time to build players up, but also getting to understand, like, in order to be confident, you usually have to go from in your comfort zone to out of your comfort zone to get confident at something else, right? So you got to get uncomfortable, but after uncomfortable, then comes comfortable. Okay, now I'm comfortable with this, and then now you can get confident. So I think it's usually a process like that. You have to be willing to push them out of their comfort zone. It can't always be feel good. Yeah. Because if you know you want to stretch them to a greater place, and it happens so much with the guys in college I work with, and even kids now that either want to play on varsity or want to play in college, it's like, yo, this is what's coming. So you can stay in this little safe comfort zone if you want, but in order for you to get confident, you got to get uncomfortable first. You got to let it be ugly and explain that to them. This is where you are. You're in this ugly part. But once you kind of get comfortable with it, with the reps and time, well, now you can be comfortable. Now you can settle in and be like, all right, I'm all right with this. And then from comfort grows confidence. And I think that goes with anything. So long answer, but I think it's a complicated question, because in college, from my experience, that's one of the things I think that I had a lot of challenges with as a player and didn't have the guidance and guessed and checked a lot and failed at that a lot. And finally kind of figured it out. And I think the same goes for life. Like sometimes we're navigating this thing and it's like people are not as confident as they may seem. So I think just figuring out confidence in general, whether it's athletics or life. Like I wasn't married before, then I got married. I was out of my comfort zone. I didn't know what I was doing. Right. I lived in Texas. Now I live in Colorado. It's not my comfort zone. Right. So there's a process before you can get confident. So that's what I would say.
No, it's good. I want to go back to something you said early on about, I love how you said helping players to see where they've come from, because I think that's a part of the process that players forget quite a bit.
Yeah.
They get to a spot and they're frustrated, or they think in this moment that they've earned more or they should receive more. And what I've felt in the past is, what about, guys, the gratitude, to yourself, the thankfulness, the appreciation, because do you remember where you started?
Right.
And even though you're in this place now and it's not where you want to be yet, don't forget that journey and those steps. Because I think so many times we get a player and this is where they are. And we talk about, well, these are the steps that it takes to move forward. And that's a part of it. But that part of looking back in your journey and being able to, puff up your chest a little bit about the accomplishments that you've had, that's a part of confidence, is remembering those past victories for sure.
And remembering the past challenges that you've overcome. You're faced with challenge now, but you've been faced with challenge many times before, and you've done it before, you'll do it again. That also feels like, you know what? Because that success breeds success. I just think there's more mental that goes into confidence than just seeing the ball go in. Because it's the time you spend by yourself in your own head. The rest of the time you're not in the gym, that's the valuable time. You got to give them something that they can connect to that helps them stay fueled, if that makes sense.
I mean, to me, when I think of a great player who just oozes confidence, I immediately go to Steph Curry. And so if you were to break him down, what makes him really special, one, that you mentioned, he's gifted. I would imagine he'd be a great dart player without having to practice very much, because of just the ability to place an object where he wants to place it. There's a gift there. But then you take into it the struggle. A lot of us know his backstory, the struggle that he had to go through and how much time he spent on his craft. You combine those two things with then this ability he must have mentally to just believe and know, either based on real experience or even just relative experience, that I can do this. I would love if we could just somehow get inside his brain and hear his thoughts as he's coming down the floor before he's about to do something. I just think that would be incredible.
Right. I think he's not given credit for as gifted as he is.
Oh,
he is very, very skilled, and he's put the time in his craft.
He's an outlier,
but he is gifted. Like we think about like his height and size, like, oh, anyone could do that. It's like, no, anyone can't do that. It don't matter how hard you work. He has some
He can throw that dart the same way,
and his accuracy
every time.
So, but I do think, to go to your part about confidence, the last part I would say is teaching players, where does confidence come from? And I got this from PGC. Shout out to PGC again, even though they're not sponsoring this podcast at all.
I wish they would, but no.
Trust me, I've had those conversations. It's not easy. But I say that and say that Dina Evans used to talk about this, and Dick DeVincio, who you also worked under or was coached by at camp. Confidence comes from two things, and then I kind of added my third. So one is preparation, which is part of what makes Steph so great, right? His routine, his regimen. Like if you asked him about his stuff, elaborate, detailed, he knows what you know what I mean? So that builds a lot of confidence when you put in the amount of made shots, the way that he does it, and ball handling. So that's one, preparation. The second one is what you daydream about or what you think about all day. And I never understood that one then I didn't say never. I didn't understand it as much in its power and how much we have these thoughts that go on all the time. And what are we seeing during the day? And Are we thinking of focus on the negative? And she gave the great example Dina did of like Dina Evans at the time would make 9 out of 10 and she would think about 1, and Kobe Bryant would make 1 out of 10 and he would think about 1 also. So there's this is what are you focusing on? She would focus on the one she missed. Like, I should have made that. I knew I could have made it. I could have got 10 to 10. And that's like what she's constantly feeding her brain and her body and her subconscious. So that track is just playing like an unclosed app on your iPhone, right? It's just playing in the background. And Kobe's just thinking about the one he made, like, yeah, I did that. It's just a different mentality. So whenever you focus that intentional energy, so I think getting players to focus more on both. You can't just show up to the gym and be good, man. Like, you got to put the time in.
Yep.
You don't put the time in, you have no chance to change your confidence, right? And then the second part is if you put the time in, but all you're focusing on is what you're not and who you aren't and how, whatever's happening that's negative, that's not going to grow either, right? So you're counterproductive. And the third thing I've added is just success breeds success. You have success, it can breed more, but it also can be an ugly monster because you can have success and think you've arrived.
You can forget.
And I think
Yep.
you said this earlier, you asked this earlier, like about a routine or one thing. One thing I'm at in my life right now is like, I feel like I'm in that place as a player where like, if you're having success, how do you make sure you're staying to the formula of how you got this success, right? And not just focus on the success. You appreciate that. So part of my story is I transitioned from college basketball. My wife and I lived in 7 different combined cities in our first 3 years of marriage, right? Get that context. So my wife for the last 2.5 years has lived in my mom's house or her mom's house. And I've lived in the same, but I had an 8-month span where I coached long distance from my family.
Wow.
Right. So context is we went from living in a basement to now having our first home that we have no business in. It's all like this God story. Right. So I say this to say, last year I'm in unemployment in the basement, like so many doubts, fears, all this stuff going. And now I'm on this other side where this house has happened. We just hosted an MTE event, which was really awesome. Division I tournament, and it had success, and ESPN broadcasting happens, and all these things start falling in place, right? We're doing these businesses on our own and we're having success with them. And God is like, but how are you going to keep this formula going? And part of the formula for me is like making sure that I'm needing him, one. Yeah. Secondly is giving back. How much am I giving my time back to make sure that I'm sowing those seeds of humility and paying it forward and bringing the next person up? So every day, like that's part of where I got the message to send to people is like, how can I make sure that I'm humble and I'm still doing the formula that got us here? Yeah. And I think it's the same thing with confidence. For my confidence to be good in what I'm doing now as an entrepreneur, and I don't have a company that's just always going to pay you every month on time, no matter what. And I'm doing kind of these random, collectively good things, but it's not one place. So it's a lot more challenging to have confidence in it, and it's new. So yeah. I think the same thing goes for like when you're a player, is not getting away from the formula once you do have success and start feeling yourself and patting yourself on the back.
Yeah. Coaches, the one thing that every team needs is confident shooters. The last 8 years at Grapevine Faith, our teams have averaged 354 made threes each season. I love getting to share with coaches how our shooters train and, more importantly, how they think. If you would like to enhance your shooting culture at your school, contact me directly at jamodipodcast@gmail.com. So I know probably as a coach, you were pretty active with social media, and now even especially maybe even more in what those jobs and things that you're doing now. So instead of just how to use social media to enhance your program, how should coaches use social media to better their players, better their programs?
Social media is such a tricky space, right? Like there's kind of this overusage in some aspects, and there's kind of this underusage, and then there's also this consumption that can happen with it, right? Like overconsumption or over Yeah, that's a good question. I think coaches, well, I think for one, I think it's an amazing opportunity more now than ever to tell your own narrative, right? To let the inside of your program. And I guess the biggest thing I would say is like, be authentic, even though social media is not built on authenticity, right? Social media is built on all these other algorithms that really don't honor authenticity. They honor all these other things, right? And so there's an element in the time to still do some of the things that can fit in the space and still be authentic. But I just think you have to show up and be real, be authentic, and let people inside of what happens behind some of the closed doors, whatever you feel comfortable with. But I think the cool parts are that you can celebrate your players more now than you ever could before.
Yep.
And you talk about confidence, like that factors into some of these kids' confidence, like getting acknowledgement from the program. Some of the weekly stuff you do in off season, where a kid gets to hold a belt, where maybe he was the most competitive or the toughest guy, or he did the best in boot camp. Like, there's ways to honor the star and guys that aren't stars. I think that's the cool part too, is like honoring some of the guys that are doing the stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Whether it's a story of like, hey, this is his story of how he got here, doing a special feature on him and having somebody else do it, but you put it out from your, maybe somebody else in the department. Maybe you guys don't have the time, but somebody in the athletic department can record it. There's a film student on campus somewhere. So yeah, I think that's cool. I think the coaches being able to share more about the mic'd up experience at practice is cool. I think it's a fine line. I just think everything should be authentic. I saw one program doing this recently, and they don't have maybe as big of a media market, but like after a win or a loss, like the guy, the SID or whoever, just records the coach talking for a minute and a half. Not long. It's not a press conference. They don't have press conferences there, but he just gives his own take on what happened in the game. And so it just gives you more of a chance to control your narrative from your point of view and not letting the masses kind of dictate what's said.
Create it. Yeah.
I think Duncanville High School has probably done as elite of a job as any in the high school realm of taking their program that was already becoming elite when PV first got there, and obviously they have a storied history. But I think PV has made, and their program has made it cool to play at Duncanville, not just because they win, but because they also cover and they have they do creative things with their social media to celebrate their players, to celebrate their culture, but to tell their story. And it's not like, oh, well, you can't do both. Well, you can do both. You can win at a high level and still celebrate your program and share.
Yeah.
So I think it's a fine line. That program comes to mind in high school because I don't know if it's perceived as as cool in high school as maybe it is in college. College is more of a part of the production, if you will.
Yeah.
They've kind of made it a part of the production. So yeah, I think those things are cool. I think anytime you can create positive moments and share authenticity, it's a great thing.
Yeah, I love the idea of using it to celebrate the entire program. And because most teams will have those one or two guys that they're getting noticed or celebrated from other medias. But so you obviously it's that balance. You want to recognize them, but still bring something to the other guys that may not in basketball get to a different level. So, and I love what you said too about being able to shape the narrative, because after a win or a loss, especially on the coaching side, from I believe as a coach who does his own social media, but then the programs as well. The program needs to be all about the players and all about what's happening, but almost more of a objective view. But then what I can do is piggybacking off of that platform, shape what, like you said, bring people in a little bit, after a loss. I think what most people would think or believe is that that coaches are just so frustrated, bitter, angry, and searching for answers. But I think what happens most of the time is especially when we give ourselves time as coaches, we realize we're closer. Our team is closer than what it appeared, and we're moving in the right direction. And when we get to show that or voice that, then you're right. Like whoever's watching, if it's even just your own players, that will allow them to let that loss go. We're going to learn from it. We're going to be better from it. Man, coach just said that. I think I listened to a podcast years ago. I don't even remember who it was. And he just said, if you're a coach at any level and you're not using social media to enhance your program, you're behind. And I don't want to be, you and I are competitive. So I don't want to be behind in anything. And so I started to try to do that for wherever I've been. But I love hearing from, your perspective from the experience you've had with college. I love hearing that.
Yeah, I think it's a cool space to be able to do. There's always a balance, but I do think you can acknowledge players that wouldn't get the acknowledgement. You can celebrate that, and you can celebrate, to piggyback real quick, you can celebrate past players and other things around it. You can celebrate community service. You can celebrate an alumni who's somewhere. I think one thing that's cool with junior colleges right now, what they're doing is celebrating their guys that are at 4-year schools and honoring when they play well or whatever. And it's kind of a cool thing to keep up with them and them still feel a part of the family. They're still being celebrated. I think U of H in particular comes to mind. They celebrate their alumni really well on their social media to honor the people, not just Olajuwon and Drexler, who everyone knows.
Yeah,
they're celebrating people that. So I think those things are cool when you can do that, and then and just let people inside. And I think if I would say one last thing is just like letting people know your program is about business and does have standards. Let them know the inside, the character of your program. But also, man, if you can have fun with your social media, it makes it where players feel like it's not just all business. You know, and I think that's a part of like life. We got to be able to have fun while we're striving for excellence.
What's one thing you would do differently if you could start over in coaching?
Pretty simple for me, man. I would be much more convicted and take the time to figure out who am I as a coach. And sometimes you don't know that young. You're just trying to find your way. But I think the sooner I could get to like, who am I? What am I about? Even if I don't know all of my coaching philosophy, just who am I as a man in coaching, right? Who am I as a person? Because so much of this competitive world can be defined by wins and losses, what other people think, what opportunities you think you're going to get. And I think I had a time where I was good at it, but man, I think I got a time when I was lost,
I think so many coaches too, especially starting out, we're not thinking about who we are. We're thinking about how to emulate the coaches that we've had or been around. And so it's way more about, okay, this is how Coach Bliss did this. And so I'm going to do it this way, which, depending on who, emulating a guy like Coach Drew, it's going to put you on a good path. You got to make sure that who you're trying to be, one, it lines up with who you are and your character, but that you're not just following the footsteps of somebody that you've seen do it that way.
Yeah. I think the same thing was parenting, coaching, leadership, period. When we follow other leaders, we just naturally take that. And if we don't do the introspection and the tough work, here's another one I stole recently of where does that come from? So that question was asked to me at Life Group after we finished. We were having a conversation. And the person I was talking to is a pastor's wife. And she's like, I'm starting to ask more and more, where does that come from? Not so much like, where does that person come from? Where does that idea come from in my head that I do that? Like, is this coming from just a habit or just something I picked up? Or is it actually coming from a place of truth and something that I really want to do? Or am I just subconsciously doing this? And I think the same thing goes for in coaching. We just do what we've seen and we've been around. And it's like, well, wait a minute, do I want to be that guy? I'm being that guy. I said I didn't want to be this guy, and I'm being that guy. So I think for me, it would be just trying to figure out, or earlier, putting more time into who I am in coaching, not so much my philosophy, offense, defense, that stuff can evolve. But who am I inside this industry? And then having enough conviction to just stay true to that and then knowing that I can align with people that are like that. But sometimes you think that doesn't exist, you think like, well, I have to do this because that's what the business says. And I don't know, I can't speak for high school. I've never worked in high school, but the college level is so intense and so transactionally driven and perception driven. And it's way more of a beast than people know. I will say that. And it's like no other industry because there's such a immediate winning mindset. We have to win now. We have to get the next recruit. We have to win the next game. We have to win every day. There's not a day that goes by that doesn't feel like there's urgency for the next practice, game, whatever, recruit. So,
which that urgency will drive people to do things that normally they wouldn't do, or if they already don't have the moral compass to keep them straight anyway. It is. I mean, you've seen it, and I experienced it. A little bit.
It's tough because there's so much money involved. We're being blunt. There's so much money involved. Salaries, TV deals, tournament, and there's so much money that can be made if you are that team that gets lightning in a bottle and takes off. So when money gets involved, it just gets crazy, and then you have this celebrity culture of sports center, social media. Every win you get, public knowledge. Every recruit you get, public knowledge. Every loss, public. So you're constantly in this public figure. Everyone's looking to see, well, how's he going to handle this? So you're not a celebrity and you're not a pro athlete, but there's such a celebrity culture within it that also makes it where, you can get lost in it, man. You can get lost in it. So I think for me, it would just be to get rooted sooner and know that I wouldn't want to waver on certain aspects of who I am and what I am about. And it's tricky because you don't know that though. So it's like my advice to people is that, but it's hard to know at what point you can really like put your stake in the ground because you feel like sometimes, well, if I do this, if I make the wrong move along the way, I may not get that big break, you know? So I think just staying true to yourself, I think that's probably the biggest thing. Knowing you can stay true to yourself, honor who you are, who God made you to be, and still have all the success you want to have. It just you may not be able to see it, but that's where you got to trust him. Yeah. That's what I would say.
All right, the speed round, man. I've known you for 25 years, and so, but I'm gonna even know you better right here.
Yes, you will. Yes, all right. I used to be fast actually with my feet. I'm not anymore. So this
you can still shoot though, because you could always shoot it.
True. This is true. It can still go in.
That's right. Favorite ice cream flavor?
So Dairy Queen Blizzard, vanilla with M&Ms.
Wow, that is specific. For high school, shot clock or no shot clock?
Shot clock, absolutely needs to happen.
Texting or talking?
Ooh. Do I have to pick one, or is it like scenarios?
No. Well, there's like an answer to that. I found if everybody was to ever ask me this question, I would say it depends on who.
Yes,
because that's the answer. If it's my mom, I better answer that phone call and get a. If not, if it's somebody, I'll just shoot them a text.
And I will say this: the thing that sometimes with this younger culture, you can't have serious conversations on text. Like you can't have business conversations. Like you can't say I'm not going to work there anymore, and you're sending a text. You can't break up with don't do that.
Yep.
There's a code. There's a standard that says like, hey, I have enough respect for you. I'm going to call you. Like that's probably the thing. So talk or text, I'd say there's a fine line of who and what's the situation. But yeah, I am more old school to like want to interact with people on the phone.
Favorite holiday?
Hard not to say Christmas just because it's just all about giving. I used to be about receiving at Christmas. I'm much more about giving now. I just think the season is cool because there's basketball on television. There's this sense of like it's cold outside, so we want to stay inside together.
Yeah, and family together.
Yeah, the familyness together. I think Thanksgiving just happened. I mean, Thanksgiving did just happen. Thanksgiving just happening. It is cool, but Christmas feels like it's a longer holiday.
Yeah.
like people in general, the world kind of shuts down more. So you get more time with the people you love. So it's less about just like the tree and all that, more about like you get more time with your people during Christmas. So I think I would have to say Christmas.
It's good. Invisibility or super strength?
Visibility for sure.
If you could travel back in time, what period would you go to?
I don't know if I would go to a period as much as I would just like, I'd probably really like to meet Martin Luther King.
Nice.
I definitely would. I don't know. There's a part of me that just would like to see like the whole Jesus story. Like maybe not like I'm hanging out with him, but just like be like behind a tree, just like, wow, that really happened. You know? Like those two come to mind more than anything.
Two more. How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
I am not a coffee drinker, so I'm a zero guy. I have
energy. What do you do?
Natural crazy energy anyway, to be honest.
Good for you, man.
Yeah, I don't really do. I do coffee some. My wife's an avid coffee drinker, so every now and then I'll sneak a something in, but definitely not like a thing. And I don't have like a Red Bull, or I'm really just like a let's go guy.
Go.
Sometimes my players be like, Coach, you can't be like that. It's early in the morning, man. Like it's 6. Like, come on. Yeah, just natural, man. I don't know.
Last one, probably the most important. Godfather or Star Wars?
Godfather. Yeah, Star Wars I appreciate, but yeah, we got to go Godfather on that.
Hey, man, this is awesome.
Thank you for having me.
I love getting to connect with you again. I've just been really such a fan of yours just over the years, getting to watch and see how you've grown, the places that you've been. But man, I really appreciate your time, and you're awesome.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you. I love what you're doing. I love that you're doing this, of all people. Always looked up to you as a teammate, seeing what you did at Baylor, wrote a book. I love that you're coaching where you're coaching, because it's important and needed. And I love that you're now spreading your wings even more. And I'm being summoned by my kids. It's time to open up. So,
hey, last thing before you go to them, what are some things how can we support you? What are some ways that we can connect, or people can? I know they can watch your games, listen to you on ESPN, but what else you got going?
Yeah, so much to got going. So the easy starting point is the social media for myself is at Coach Burton 13 on Instagram and Twitter. So that's always easy. Websites for some of the businesses, or all of them, are coming. They're not here yet, but that's the easiest way to start, is just finding me on social. And then the games I broadcast is for Northern Colorado, their home games. It's on ESPN Plus. And yeah, I'm kind of in and around and associated with a lot, but we have an All Access network, which is kind of a media network podcast that we cover all levels of basketball, which has been really fun. We had over 200 shows in season 1 and over 400 guests, which was insane.
That's incredible.
Yeah, we had 11 million views, whatever that means. So that was fun. And still is. We still do that weekly, more or less, during the season. And then my wife and I started a company where we work together to do basically help people have more success. That's the whole goal. Teams, organizations. So it's called Uprise Athletics Group. And so we do events, we do development and consulting under that. And then I have a scouting service, believe it or not, where helping schools kind of figure out who out here can still play and do their thing. And so that's called All Access Recruit Scoop. So yeah, I'm staying plenty busy. I'm having a blast. I wouldn't trade it, because you get to impact a lot more lives on this side, man. This has been fun for me.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm proud of you, and keep doing everything you're doing, man.
Yeah, thank you. Look forward to doing it again.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the Jamodi Podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.